and welcome to the Teaching Together podcast, where we celebrate and share the glows and grows of teacher life. I'm Grace.
And I'm Sierra.
And with us today is a very special guest, Hannah.
Hello.
It's so good to have you.
Each episode on the show, we like to share a glow or grow from things that have been happening in our life or in our classrooms. My one to share for today is a glow, but it's a little bit of a dangerous glow. So I have a new Year 8 class that I've picked up this term, and I was really, really intentional about setting start of lesson routines with them. And I was arriving to my class just a couple minutes after the bell one day last week, and I sort of heard them like scurrying around at the door, and I was sort of like, oh, what's happening? And as I came around the bend just before they saw me, I sort of heard them say, hurry up, why is she so scary? and I had a minor celebration moment internally before I then made sure that when I got to the door, I was like very smiley and congratulated them on how well they had prepared and how organized they were, getting all their things out ready to go. Because I don't, I guess, want them to be terrified of me, but I was like, yes, I've made it. They respect me. So that would have to be my glow for this week.
Mine is kind of, I think, depending on how you look at it, a glow and a grow. Because, you know, I'm so far along in my teaching career now in term 4 of my first ever year. And I am already looking back on the things I was doing in term 1 and going, what on earth was I thinking? Like, that was not an intelligent decision. And I've heard lots of teachers say this, and I was always terrified of coming to that conclusion because I didn't want to look back on things that I really thought were really awesome at the time. But I was really just doing the best I could with the experience I had, which was 0. So I am definitely happy that I am even at the end of my first year. I am confident enough and have enough experience to go, oh, actually, I would do a lot of that stuff differently. So I guess that's a glow, but now I also am aware of where I need to grow. But yeah, I can't believe I've almost finished my first year. It's a bit crazy. Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting and very sad. I'll miss my class a lot. I'm already sad about that, even though I was complaining to you guys today about how they drive me insane. But we're a family and I love them. Hannah, do you have a glow or a grow?
I do. I actually just got made permanent at my school, which I'm very excited about. I didn't think I was that, I didn't think I cared that much. But then when I got the phone call, I just burst into tears as my faculty hugged me, and it was a very wholesome moment. So it turns out I really do care, and I'm very happy. Congratulations. Thank you. Well, on our previous episode, it was a nice short recess digest that was having a quick look at some more habits of mind. The 3 we chose to focus on were metacognition, flexible thinking, and questioning, because we feel like those 3 dispositions really interrelate and kind of rely on each other. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, make sure you go back and check it out. And also, if you have any feedback for us on the shorter episode lengths, we would love to hear it.
On today's episode with our very special guest, we are going to be kind of going through teaching from a New South Wales Department of Education perspective, because both Sierra and I have experience in independent schools. So we thought it would be awesome to get Hannah on to get some inside information on what it's like to apply for approval to teach in the department. And Hannah's in her 2nd year of teaching. And I do remember her saying at the very beginning of this year when I was starting, she was like, Grace, it gets so much better. Like, your first year is just a bit of a dumpster fire sometimes, but it gets better. So we're going to hear some encouragement, hopefully, from someone who has survived her first year, and just get to know another teacher a little bit. But first, it's time for tea.
Today, we are all partaking in the same beautiful cup of tea. We made a nice large pot of this really nice loose leaf tea that I actually got as like a a gift at the end of a dinner. Like we went to a restaurant in the city for a birthday celebration on the weekend, which was lovely. And at the end, as we were leaving, they gave us all these little pots of tea. So this particular tea is flavored desert lime and lemon myrtle. It's got a little bit of a citrus flavor, but it's not like overly fruity. Subtle. And I love lemon myrtle. When I was teaching food tech, we made these lemon myrtle shortbread biscuits and they were just divine. But yes, the notes on the container said that this was a quenching tea, and I would have to agree with it.
Very quenching.
And with that, we will jump right into the interrogation of Hannah. So, standard questions. What do you teach? And I kind of spoiled this one, but how long have you been a teacher?
Well, I am almost finished my second year of teaching, which feels crazy to me that's gone so fast. I teach high school. I am a music and art teacher, and I also teach technology mandatory for a specific year 8 class that we have at our school.
All of which sounds straight up impossible to me, so good on you. Every time we have chats, I'm always like, I don't know how you do it. And you love it, and I'm like,
Yeah, but then you tell me about spending all day with the same tiny children who cannot do anything for themselves, and I think, no, I made the right decision. So
yeah, we both made the right decision.
Yeah.
So speaking of that decision, what made you decide to be a teacher?
Well, I think teaching was always the plan for me. I was very into music as a child and a teenager. And so I always thought, well, if I can do music teaching, that would be awesome. I didn't always like school. And so I think for me, it was wanting to be very realistic about how, not all children like to be at school. Not the school environment isn't always for every kid. So I wanted to be that relatable person who could talk to them about that. And I actually did my music degree and then decided to stop study because uni is very overwhelming. It's the worst. And so then just worked as an SLSO for about 5 or 6 years. And I think that was what actually got me back into being a teacher, because there's just being an SLSO was a really great experience. You're one-on-one with kids and you get to have that, real-time impact with them in a very small level. And I think looking at teachers, I always wanted to have that bigger impact and see what more I could do for more kids at once. Have that responsibility to deal with multiple children and all their complex needs and see how I could maybe provide a safe space for so many kids and what I could do to be a safe person for them. Yeah.
I love that because it is very cheesy, but teaching is a work of heart.
It is.
And I love that that's your reason for becoming a teacher. And I think, I love when teachers reveal themselves to be empathetic individuals who care about their students. And I would say probably definitely all three of us are empathetic individuals who care about our students. So that's really awesome that we have another awesome caring teacher in the profession. Thank you, Hannah. I wish I was in your class. And you could make me love art. And in all of that, what is your favourite part about being a teacher?
I think it's a tie between just being able to see kids thrive in a different space. We have so many little complex individuals that we work with, and they all have their little talents and their hobbies that they only shine in certain subjects. And I love in being in a creative subject, being able to see them thrive in when maybe they're not necessarily the most academic in literacy or numeracy. And I also just really love that teenagers say really silly things and I get to laugh at them. And that's really fun. It just helps the day go a little bit smoother sometimes.
They definitely value add a lot to our days.
Yeah.
What would you say is your biggest teaching pet peeve?
It's when you've taken the time and you've set up the perfect lesson and you've explained it. You've used explicit instruction. You've used verbal cues. You've used non-verbal cues. You've got your learning intention and success criteria on the board, and you get through your explanation and a kid goes, what are we doing? And it just makes me kind of want to hit my head against the whiteboard and just wonder where I went wrong.
Oh, I wrote a blog post literally about this on the weekend, about how just lessons that don't go to plan and how devastating that can be. But I'd seen, the reason I wrote it was because I saw on one of the teacher Facebook groups that I was part of, one of the members wrote this big long sort of post where it was kind of a debrief, but also like seeking, I guess, advice, because she was on prac and she'd planned this lesson and it just kind of all hit the fan and she was really devastated. And I just felt like I really felt sorry for her, but also like was just reminded that that doesn't happen to people just on placement. Like a few weeks ago, I tried to do a lesson with my year 7 tech class where they were marking out timber that they were going to be cutting, and just was absolutely thrown by the fact that they just could not use the rulers.
Oh, darling.
And it was just, you know, I had videos, I had verbal instructions, I did actual demonstrations, and just nothing, no matter how clear I thought I made the instruction, as soon as, you know, I said, okay, now you've got 2 minutes to mark that part yourself and then we'll move. I was going step by step, you know, like one at a time. And it was just chaos, because as soon as I'd stop, there would be like, Miss, can you come and help me with this?
Yeah.
And I'd get dragged to one table, and then the next lot of kids would just hover around me like seagulls waiting for me to finish so I could turn around and come and help them. And I just felt so overwhelmed and like sensory overloaded, and just felt like there's actually no way I can back out of this or fix this right now other than to just persevere and then rethink it all after I've had time to be in the fetal position for a little while under my desk.
Yep.
It's just, yeah, things just don't always go to plan. And no matter how well you explain things, sometimes it just feels like it doesn't sink in. One of the big things we wanted to ask is, like Grace said earlier, we are both working in independent schools, and we would love it if you could tell us everything about how to get your approval to teach in the Department of Education in New South Wales. I've seen lots of people ask questions about this online, and I feel like it's something that, lots of people just want to have their head around before they kind of get to that point. So, we would love you to share your experience.
Well, it's honestly, I'm not surprised that there's so many questions, because it's one of those things that so many people trip up on because it's not fully explained, which it should be, because you literally can't teach without being approved. And I think it's so funny because I was in my first year of teaching last year, and it was the beginning of the term 1, and I thought I was I had done everything and it was great, and I was teaching year 9 class, and it was actually really great because my head teacher and the business manager had walked into my class and it was actually going super well. So I was quite impressed with myself, and I was like, oh, maybe they're just coming in to pop in and say hi, see how I'm going. Well, actually, they stayed with me because there's only a few minutes left of the period. And when the period ended, they were like, just leave everything here. We need to go have a chat to you. And I was like, I'm fired. Like, I've done something terrible that I don't even know about. But they said, hey, your approval to teach hasn't come through. And I said, what approval to teach? And they said, you know, your teaching approval with the department. And I said, no one told me about a teaching approval with the department. So thankfully, my head teacher and my business manager are both lovely human beings. And they sat with me through the process. And basically what had happened is it wasn't just me. There was actually a few other early career teachers at my school who it had happened to as well. And I know that it's happened to other people as well in their first year of teaching. So the main thing to remember is that NSW and the department, while you think they'd be best mates, they don't really talk to each other that much.
Of course they don't. Why would they?
Because why would make it easy? So Essentially, before you can apply to get your approval to teach, the main things to remember before you can even get to that stage are you need to be in your final year of uni or completed your teaching degree, and you need to have done at least one prac. So you need to have one prac report that you can submit. Then you'll also have to make sure you've completed your suitability assessment, your land tied exams, and make sure you have a paid employment to working with children check, which I'm assuming is fairly basic knowledge. And then you need to apply for and obtain your accreditation, which is where most people go wrong, because most people think, oh, okay, I've got my accreditation now, whether it's a conditional accreditation or a provisional, and they're like, sweet, I'm good. I've got another few years until I have to make it a full accreditation. That's all sweet. But no one actually tells you that you have to, once you get your accreditation, apply for approval. So it's an extra step.
Yay.
It's very fun. So basically how to apply, once you've got all that previous information and once you've done all those first steps, the next thing to do is you go onto the department website. You can just search teaching approvals. It's laid out quite nicely, and there'll be an application. And basically for your application, it's quite simple. You just have to put in your personal information. You nominate some schools or some areas that you'd prefer to work at. And then there's some extra mandatory documentation, including your current educational transcripts. So you don't have to have finished uni yet, but you will need to provide your transcript as what it is currently, even if it's not completed. And then there'll just be a few extra questions about working preferences. So this can include stuff like, would you be willing to work in a school or a community with a very high First Nations population or student enrollment? So there's just a few questions. It doesn't actually take too long, the actual application. But what can take time is the application to be processed. So that is definitely something to keep in mind if you are starting a teaching job in the new year, or you're looking at going into teaching soon. The sooner you can get your application in, the better, because the department does take a lot of time to do things. Fortunately for me, I was already working at the school and I had a good relationship with my principal and with my business manager. So they asked for the application to be pushed and placed on high priority because I was already teaching and wasn't supposed to even be in the classroom. So it was a little bit scary. But yeah, definitely just if you ever have any questions, definitely talk to your principal or your business manager of your school, because they are definitely really great people who are very, very helpful in that situation. The other thing as well is to also know that if you are finishing uni, so if you've still got, like I had, another year left, you'll only be placed on an interim approval. So it's kind of like a short-term approval before you're fully approved once you finish your degree. So I was placed on interim approval for the first year that I was teaching. And then because it took a little bit longer for my uni documents to come through once I'd finished, that was just extended for a few more months. And then once I got all my uni documents, I was just able to put them through, and that was it. That was my approval done. It's also just good to check, because NSW and the department don't like to talk to each other very often. It also is just very good to just check in both your portals, in your NSW login and your department login, that both sets of information are in both places, because sometimes it's in one place and it's not in another, or sometimes you'll update your information in one place and it won't transfer to the other place. So definitely just good to make sure you're on top of checking both accounts to make sure they match.
How were you able to be employed without your approval to teach? Yeah, what is then the job application process that meant that piece of information went astray?
It's a good question. No one really knows. So when you enter, and don't get me wrong, I love working for the department. I love my school. But when you enter the department, you just kind of realize that information just kind of floats around in this department bubble. And you just hope that someone who earns more money than you has the information somewhere, and they talk to the relevant people. Otherwise, it's just many hours on the phone to EdConnect, which is a little bit of a nightmare. But when they do answer the phone, they are very helpful. Yeah, so because
the music you have to listen to up until that point.
Yes. 2 point, literally, and like the 1,000 buttons you have to press before you even get to speak to someone. But yeah, I think because in my case, I was also working as an SLSO at that school previously. And so most things I already had in terms of being employed at the school. I just didn't have my approval. But it happened to a few other teachers who weren't working at the school previously, and it was just because they got their accreditation, they had their uni degrees, they had everything they needed to do. They had their working with children's checks, they'd passed their land types, everything like that. But it's not something that's told directly to you to go get your approval. And so people, I think, rightly just assume that they've done everything, or that you applying as a teacher, like you're on it, you've done all your paperwork. And it wasn't until like my business manager just checked on accident, just because she was looking at people's paperwork, that she realized. And so it was just kind of a lucky thing that it happened in the start of the year, rather than me being like 6 months down the track and not supposed to be teaching.
Yeah. So am I right in understanding that you can apply directly to the school for positions, but you can also like be assigned positions through applying just to the department?
Yeah, it's a bit confusing. So most jobs are done through Job Feed, which is through I Work for New South Wales. And there's very different ways of applying based on what role you're going for. In my case, because I'd been working at the school already, I was already known there. And so my principal and a few other of the teachers were like, oh, well, we've got, as someone who's studying music, we've got a free music position, let's just put her in. And all my paperwork was kind of put through, very quickly in that way. And so I didn't have to do a lot. And I was very blessed in that way to be able to just step into a job. But when I got my permanency, for example, I had to go through I Work for New South Wales. The job feed came out, and it was basically merit selection. And so I was first on the list, thankfully. And yeah, so I was able to apply for an EOI and then accept the position when it came to me via a phone call and an email. And then I just had to do my onboarding, which is basically just a few questions about, have you ever been unfit to work? Do you have any medical, physical, mental impairments that might stop you from working or prevent you from working? And it's just basically tick boxes until you click accept.
Yeah, cool.
So you survived this and you made it through your first year, thankfully, with approval. How would you describe your first year of teaching in one word, or maybe a phrase or a sentence if one word is too hard?
Well, I am a creative and performing arts teacher. So if I can give you maybe an image to think about, it's just imagine a nuclear bomb and a mushroom cloud. That's what it feels like to be in your first year, which I'm sure you can relate.
I am in the middle of that right now. There is fallout all over the place.
Yeah.
That was not what I expected you to say, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, like there's ash falling and you can't fix it.
No.
Like the sky's gone black.
Yeah, the land is uninhabitable for literally 20,000 years.
You know the sun will come out eventually, you just don't know when.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, that is one of the most real things I have heard in this week. That's so good. Well, in a similar vein, what were some of the hardest things about your first year?
I think the hardest thing about being a first year teacher is that you come out of uni and you've got so many fresh ideas. You've got all these thoughts, all these things you want to try, and you can only try so many things at once. And I think also it's really hard because in my case, I had an amazing faculty that I was and still am working with. And I looked at my head teacher who mentored me on my last prac, and I just go, okay, that's the goal. that's where I want to be. And I think I forget that she had already been teaching for, 15 years and I'd been teaching for 15 seconds. And so I think the hardest part was you want to do everything, you want to be the best already, and it takes time. And I think another thing that I really struggled with was that because I wanted to be the best, I was so hard on myself. And I think people forget that teaching is such a socially and emotionally demanding job. And no one can really prepare you for how draining it is. Even if you've had a great day, you still come home at the end of the day feeling absolutely emotionally drained. And it's because you care. And I think as an early career teacher, you care so much and you want to do the best you can and you want to prove that you got what it takes. And I think being hard on yourself for not being the best is really, really hard, and it's very detrimental to your confidence and your self-esteem when you're probably doing a really great job for the experience that you have.
Yes, I feel so heard. I just stole the mic from Sierra because I feel so heard. I literally, this is how I've been feeling. Basically, I had a honeymoon period of 4 weeks at the beginning of the term, beginning of the year. And then I kind of crash landed into reality and was I don't know. I think I'm doing a terrible job. I am bad at this. We have to write all these programs. I have no idea what I'm doing. And who trusted me with the lives of 18 kids? Who thought that was a good idea to give me keys to the building? I'm a baby. I shouldn't be in charge of other babies. So thank you for validating.
No, I hear you.
And I need to do a little bit of a humble brag. It's really just a brag because in saying all this about I have zero self-confidence at the moment in my ability to teach. I feel like I'm always doing a terrible job. But apparently I have out of all the kindy teachers that we have right now who will be also the kindy teachers for next year, I've been the most requested from parents coming in. And I'm where are you getting your information from? I'm the least experienced out of all of us. I'm just winging it. I have literally no idea what I'm doing. But that was just a nice ego boost. These parents don't know me. Lots of them, they're just coming from random places. I don't know who they're talking to. But it was really nice for my ego to go, oh, okay. Teaching is not a popularity contest. We want to be scary. We want to be respected. But it was really nice. So thank you, Hannah, for validating my feelings of not feeling very confident. But I also wanted to share that people like me. So
of course they like you. They take one look at your beautiful warm smile and they're like, oh yeah, she's going to be great for kindergarten. But don't forget, kids talk. I mean, that's why it's so hard to establish yourself as a first year teacher, is because the kids don't know you. And so they're very skeptical and they want to push and see what buttons they can push and see how they can test you. And it takes a while to establish yourself in that way with the kids. And if the kids are saying that in your first year that, you're a great teacher and they think their friend should have you next year or their little sibling should have you, then that's amazing. You should be very, very proud of that.
I really related to what you were saying about feeling like you couldn't do everything at once when you first came out. I remember having so many thoughts and ideas, and especially because we all worked as SLSOs or teachers' aides before we went into teaching. So we'd really had so much opportunity to watch what people do and sort of pick up on, yeah, I do like that. No, I don't like that. I wouldn't run my classroom like that. I really like that idea. All those things. And then because I'm a bit of a nerd and I also like to read and, think that I know better than everyone else, which is totally wrong. Actually, and I felt quite rebuked today when I was at a PD and about the new syllabus, and the presenter was talking about how there's some people who are really stuck in their old ways and are not really prepared to change and try and make the new syllabus work to just what they want to do rather than trying to adapt to what it's trying to achieve. And then there are some people who just try to do too much at once. And I felt my colleague kind of look at me and I was I'm sorry. But I did have to try and be really conscious. I'm okay, let me just pick one thing that I want to try and implement and work really hard on that. And then when that becomes a natural thing, pick another thing that I want to try and implement. But yeah, it's so hard. And when you're so excited and Before You're Jaded. And there's just so many things that, you want to try. But what were some of the best things about your first year?
Well, the best things, I guess, were definitely getting to know the kids. Kids are so weird, and I just love how weird they are. And that was just really, really cool to get to work with them in a new light, and just to be able to help them in different ways than I was previously. I also just really loved like extra stuff. Like we did a musical, and my head teacher is of the mindset that it's, you're not going to know how to do it until you do it. And I'd rather throw you in the deep end now while you've got me as a support, as a safety net, rather than just do it for you and then you not be able to do it as well later. And so we have a few early career teachers in our faculty. And so putting on a musical is actually an insanely just wild thing to do. But it was definitely so cool to see how many things a school can run. And I think I had heard before that schools are such a big part of a community. And I think I kind of believed that, but I think doing things like extracurricular and talking to parents and getting to know what these kids are doing outside of school hours, that was a really, really amazing thing. And to see how much schools really are a part of their community and what we can be bringing to these kids, even if they're not, ticking off the content every single lesson, just being able to be there for them and let them just be their weird little selves in whatever space that looks like. Whether it's in a musical or whether it's writing a peel paragraph or whether it's, making clay or a sculpture out of cardboard. Whatever it is, they're just really cool little people.
They are. What would you say to someone who, like, I remember in my first year feeling like, I was at school at 7:30, I didn't leave till 5:30, and I didn't really stop for recess or lunch, and I didn't really talk to anyone because I just felt like I had too much to do. And I also was helping making costumes for the musical in my first term of arriving at my first school, and that was insane. But like for people who might just feel like, I don't have time to get involved in co-curriculars yet, there's just like too much on my plate. And how would you maybe encourage that, or say that maybe being involved in co-curriculars was like really helpful or unhelpful as you were like establishing yourself in your school?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a catch-22 because the more you do, the more you experience, and all experiences, whether they're good or bad in this space, are valuable and you can learn from them. But at the same time, it's a big hit in the face starting a career that is so full on. And so I think for me, it was about what extracurricular stuff can I cope with in this time frame, and whether it's you're looking at week to week, whether you're looking at term to term, or whether it's just, for my first year, all I want to do is this. I think for me it was, I really enjoy, musicals and that side of things. So for me to be involved in that was kind of like a privilege, and I wanted to try it, and I was really wrecked. But it also made me rely on my colleagues a lot more. And that was a really, really cool thing, because I think the bond you build with your work colleagues is unlike anything else when you work in teaching. It's a very, very cool, strong bond. But at the same time, there were certain things that I wanted to do last year, but I didn't. And for example, this year, now that I've gotten a little bit of skills under my belt and I feel like I'm not drowning all of the time, I've started doing choir once a week, building the school choir back up. And I wouldn't have been able to do that last year because it would have been too much. And I think it's just picking and choosing which things are going to bring you joy and which things are going to just drain you for the sake of an experience or for the sake of putting it on your resume. A more experienced teacher who is brilliant, she once said to me that you don't have to rise in your career in the first 5 years. She said, just be a teacher for 5 years and then you can go on to be a head teacher or a year advisor or whatever it is. She's like, you don't need to be anything more than what you are right now. Just get some skills under your belt. Get comfortable enough in the classroom with that really tough class so that when you go on to have more responsibility, that you'll actually be able to handle it. And I think I tried to take that on as much as I could, but it's really hard saying no. And there's so many things that school offers. Like there's so many extracurriculars and clubs and there's so many things that you can do, and you want to be involved in all of it because it shows that you're, a really good asset to the school, but you can be an asset to the school just doing what you do in the classroom as well. And being out in the playground, making kids feel safe or having fun or whatever. So definitely do stuff, but don't feel you have to do everything at once. Just do what is actually going to be fun for you to do, not what's going to make you even more burnt out than you're probably already going to end up at the end of the year.
Yeah. So if you could give yourself, your first year self, a little bit of advice, and possibly some advice for some people who are listening about to head into their first year of teaching, what do you think is the most essential?
I think I would give my younger self, even though she's only a year younger than me, I think I would just give her a hug and say, it's actually okay. You're doing fine. I think one thing that really helped me, and I try to carry with me now when I still have moments of doubt and think that I am so silly, is if someone else was in my position, what would I say to them? Because 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be really supportive of them and really encouraging because I can see how well they're doing. And when we look at ourselves, we very often don't give ourselves the same kindness and encouragement because we just want to be hard on ourselves and we want to pick out the very minuscule flaws and look at what we should have done or wanted to do better. And I think just being less hard on ourselves, especially when we're still learning.
And again, thank you for saying all of that because that really hits me. And I think that with that, we need to be humble as early career teachers, especially me being in my first year, and realize that we are still learning, even though we're all very gung-ho about getting in and doing all the things. And I think I have said too many times to count this year that I have been humbled more in this year than I have probably in my whole life. Just like professionally and like by my colleagues and by the students in my class, and just, yeah, it's very humbling being a teacher, and it is absolutely exhausting. And I have sat with, like at lunch or whatever, some of the other more experienced teachers in my staff room, and I've been just so bone dead tired and just, I've got nothing. And they're like, yeah, it's your first year. Like, give yourself some grace. And I was like, that's right. I actually don't need to have it all together because I've literally never done this before.
That's it.
Yes, my training wheels are still on. So yes.
Also, just on that, I think another thing to remember is that something my head teacher has taught me is no matter whether you've been teaching for 1 year or 20 years, a good teacher never thinks they know everything.
Ugh.
And so
Yes.
even if you have been teaching for a long time and you've got everything together and your classroom management is A+, we should always be reflective and improving and changing our discipline or our pedagogy depending on what students we have in front of us. And so I think it's kind of a relief to not have to think that we're trying to get to a goal. We can get to small little goals, but we don't have to eventually be this amazing teacher and once we're there, we've done it, we've made it. We should always be reflecting and be a lifelong learner.
Yes, I remember my first head teacher saying to me, teaching is a job that will never be finished. So like killing yourself over being here for, X amount of hours during the day and not actually giving yourself time to rest and eat and exercise and do all the other things that you need to do to manage your well-being is not really worth it because like you'll never actually feel like you're done. You'll never actually feel like you're fully prepared for whatever's happening next. And I think that was a really important lesson for me to learn, because I know that I could spend hours doing things to just change stuff or try things different ways or redo something that I'd already done or write new activities from scratch and things like that. So unless it's like a really heavy marking season or a heavy reporting season, I'm really hesitant to do weekend work. Whereas before, in my first year, it was like I was working till 9 or 10 o'clock most nights, and then, you know, a day and a half on the weekend, like just feeling like it didn't stop. And that reminder that, you know, we could keep going. We could find things to do forever. And you actually need to just, sort of sometimes realize like good enough is good enough, and you can stop and rest now.
Yeah, I've really let go of my perfectionism as the year has gone on, especially in terms of classroom displays, because I was so excited about the idea of having my own classroom that I got to decorate and stuff. But my classroom displays have been absolutely abysmal because I just don't have the energy. Like I just could not be bothered, which honestly surprises me because I love to do things and do them well. And I did love setting up my classroom at the beginning of the year. But I just couldn't be bothered to cut and then laminate and then cut it again, only to take it down at the end of the term because we're changing topics or whatever. However, Kmart came through again. We love Kmart. I went on a Kmart date with one of the girls that I work with, and it was the best thing ever. And I bought a $12 paper trimmer, just like a mini guillotine, which is the flat ones, and you just like slide the little blade across the ruler and then you slide it back. Life-changing. I cut and laminated and then cut again pretty much everything that I had been like hoarding since the beginning of the term that I printed out and gone, that'll be a good resource, and then didn't do anything with. And so now I have this pile of stuff that will be great for next year's kindergarten class, but not so great now because we're now beyond the skills that I printed out these resources for. So I guess a tip for my slightly younger self as well is get a paper trimmer from Kmart, guys. Seriously, get on it. Before we wrap up, we've made it through our first year. Well, you have, Hannah. You have, Sarah. I almost have. I only have like 3 and a bit weeks to go, which is actually really sad. Coming to the end of your second year, Hannah, how would you describe your second year of teaching in a word or an image?
I think in a word, it's just better.
Good.
Like, I think I've said to you before, Grace, that you don't realize how much you're struggling or how terrible you feel about yourself until you get to your second year and you're like, oh, no, I actually can do this.
Yes.
And it's kind of like this light bulb moment where you're like, oh, okay, I'm still treading water and the waves are still coming at me. There is no land in sight. However, my head isn't underneath the water all the time now. I can actually swim a little bit, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love that. It's like when you don't realize you've been really sick and then you go to the doctor and like you have this one specific thing wrong with you and then that thing is fixed and you're like, this is how everyone feels all the time. Like,
yeah,
I've been really going through it and didn't even know, like, yeah, which is good to know. Like, it's just, this has been a very validating conversation for me. I hope it is for all of you guys listening because I just feel so much better. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And in the vein of reflection, what are some of the things that you may have changed about your teaching practice from your first year to your second year, or maybe even something that you want to change for next year? Any of the above?
Yeah, I mean, I think one big thing that I had to learn was that it doesn't always have to be about content. I think as a first year teacher, I saw the program and I saw the scope and sequence and on the paper, and I was like, okay, these are the goals. I have to meet these, otherwise I'm a terrible teacher. Whereas that's just a lot of pressure to put on not only myself as a teacher, but also on my kids who are just coming in as kids and just need, like, how tiring must it be to sit in a class with 29 other kids for 5 hours a day, and you don't even get a break from them at lunchtime. You've still got to hang out with them and have, stupid petty fights with them. Like, yes. It must be exhausting for them. So I think for me, learning that building the relationship with the kids needs to come first and then building those structures and those routines, making your classroom a predictable learning environment needs to come number one, because then the content will follow. If you've got that relationship with your kids, and it takes the time to build it, and I think you're consistently building it with them over the year or over their schooling journey. But that relationship with the kids and them coming in knowing exactly what you expect of them and them being able to follow through on that, they can't learn any content until they've got that.
Amen.
And it's a really painful process.
Yes.
Because it takes so much time to build those connections and build those habits and build those routines. But once it's there, the content will come, and the content will come so much easier than you thought it would.
Yeah. Just yes. Yeah, I thank you so much, Hannah, for sharing all of your great wisdom. You've been so insightful and articulate and helpful. And I didn't say this at the beginning, and I should have, that Hannah is one of my dearest friends in the whole world, and just so happens to be a teacher like my other dearest friend, the host of this podcast. This has just been so magical and delightful. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to this as much as I did, just basking in the glow of my two teacher besties in the same room, talking about teaching. So good.
Well, you can find us on all the socials as usual and your podcasting platforms of choice. If you found this episode useful, or you know someone who might, please make sure you send it their way and leave us a lovely collection of stars. We would love to see them. Thank you so much to Hannah for joining us and sharing her experiences with us today. We really enjoyed having you.
Thank you. It was so amazing and such a privilege for me to be here. Listening to you guys just chat like friends and colleagues, it's always so inspiring, and I really, really appreciate this podcast and you two as people.